Headline: Fired FBI Director James Comey is expected to testify before the Senate Intel Committee as early as next week. A source tells CNN Comey is expected to confirm his account that President Trump did pressure him to end his investigation into Michael Flynn. What would that mean? Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. How big is this?
Well, it's very big. If the president, remember, the president fired Comey as head of the FBI. They first put out, they had the vice president go out and say untruths about why, relating to Comey's conduct with respect to Hillary Clinton's investigation last year. Then the president himself came out and said that wasn't the reason. If the president fired Comey because he had asked for loyalty and hadn't gotten it, because he had asked him to ease off on the investigation of Flynn, because in effect he was asking him to ease off on the investigation of possible collusion by the Trump campaign with the Russians in subverting the election, that would be obstruction of justice, which is an impeachable offense.
Would it be, though? Because you would argue that you didn't have an official process going on at that time because you didn't have the grand jury and panel. Then you got a bad fact here, which is James Comey, by his own reckoning, was not affected by whatever the president did or did not say to him.
An obstruction of justice does not have to be effective.
True, it's an intent-based crime.
It's an intent-based crime. And we're not talking about a criminal thing here. We're talking about obstruction of the process of obstruction of justice. And that would be a very, very serious thing to attribute to the president.
Even if Comey says... See, my point is this. I think this winds up being political, not legal. That, that if Comey says, yeah, he asked me to do that, but yeah, I thought I could handle it. I wrote it in the memo at the time. I didn't reach out to the DOJ. I didn't reach out to any of the operative congressional committees, which we know Comey would do under certain circumstances, right? We all remember that from the campaign. Where does this really go?
Well, it depends. First of all, it depends what else we find out. There's an investigation going on. There's a criminal investigation going on. One of the problems you have is that that criminal investigation may or may not result in reports. It may result in indictments. It may not. We need, and that's why we've been calling for a special commission like the 9/11 Commission, to find out exactly what happened about the Russian attempted subversion of our election, which Americans cooperated with that, and what we can do to prevent that. That's why we need a 9/11 Commission type for the future. But again, if the president fired Comey in order to try to subvert the investigation, that would be effectively, if not criminally, an obstruction of justice, and that would figure into any subsequent proceedings.
Maybe. What happens if the president exerts immunity here and says, you can't talk about this stuff? This was a private conversation. In the furtherance of my office as president, I'm going to exercise my immunity here.
Well, as some people have said on this show a little while ago, he's in a very weak position to do that since he's talked about it so much already, number one. And number two, Comey would have to judge that. Comey's going to be the one who's testifying in front of Congress. He'll decide what questions he can answer and what questions he can't answer.
And Mueller would have the ability to supersede that immunity authority for his own purposes.
For his own purposes, not for congressional testimony.
Right, so him testifying before Congress, Comey helps Mueller because he could avoid that legal fight. So we'll see what happens there. Nunes, he said he was stepping away. Maybe the media used it, but not him, the word recusing himself. But really, in this context, there's no difference. And his staffer comes out and says recusal was something very different. That's a real process. He just said he was stepping away. This was temporary. He comes out, signs subpoenas, once again, apparently didn't work with his own committee in doing so, and seems to be targeting Obama administration officials about unmasking. What do you make of that?
Well, Nunes, number one, is violating the rules of his own committee. He's not supposed to issue subpoenas without consultation with the ranking Democrat, which apparently didn't happen. But this is entirely a diversion. The president tweeted out, based on no evidence whatsoever, that President Obama had bugged his campaign. Nunes collaborated with the administration in trying to bring out information which they had. That's why he had to recuse himself in the first place. And now he's subpoenaing information which is going to come up blank because everybody involved says it didn't happen. About whether, in fact, they unmasked agents, so they, in effect, tried to wiretap the president. Now, that apparently didn't happen. There's no evidence that it happened except for the president's tweet. And this has nothing to do with the investigation into what really has to be investigated, which is the Russian subversion of the American electoral process.
Doesn't it make the point, though, that you guys can't do this? You are too inherently partisan, and that you got to leave it to the FBI and now to Mueller and let them do it. You can't get the politics out of this.
It makes the... I don't know that Congress can't inherently do it. Maybe, maybe not. But certainly this Republican Congress cannot do it. And you've seen how partisan they have been. But that doesn't mean you have to leave it to Mueller, because Mueller is conducting a criminal investigation.
Right.
We have to get to the bottom of what happened, who colluded with the Russians, if anybody, whether the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians, whether the president colluded with the Russians. And we have to make sure that nothing like that happens again. And that's why we need an independent commission. Because, again, Mueller, who everybody thinks is a very good guy, and I believe that too, but he's conducting a criminal investigation. That will result in indictments, or maybe not indictments. It's not intended to result in a report to say what happened.
Right.
The country desperately needs that.
Jerry Nadler, thank you very much. Appreciate having you here.